As you know, as we've all been told by Al Gore and several other celebrity climate change fanatics, there's a climate crisis on. And I've been trying to think, what can you do about climate crisis? Well, I worked it out. Because we're all now freezing in our homes in Australia. Many people are freezing in our homes in Australia. I worked on what to do about the climate crisis. Because I've learned to put in my house, where in the past in Australia, because we've regressed due to climate change philosophy, we've regressed backwards, where like in the old days, 19th century, where people used to huddle around one lump of coal, but you can't have coal anymore. And so putting a heater on now threatens you the rest of your life, because you could get a bill so large that if you have to go to doctors or put new tyres on your car or something like that, then you really become suddenly in a really terrible position if you're a pensioner. But that's what they want, because the climate crisis is about creating sort of a slow euthanasia for all the people who can't afford heating anymore in their homes. And here in America, in England, in Australia, they're freezing old people to death in their homes. And it is a sort of form of euthanasia and part of the culling that David Icke sort of talked about. But it's done very surreptitiously and sneakily. Oh, you can't afford your power bill, so you freeze to death. An actual fact, some countries in the world have power bills so low, everyone can afford to keep warm. So it all depends on the sort of government, how much compassion for its people, whether people can keep warm in the house. It's nothing to do with anything other than that. The lack of humanity in Western governments was causing people to freeze to death in their homes. And that's the climate crisis we have. The climate crisis we're having now is people freezing to death in their homes because of global warming. And as if it was suddenly going to get warm overnight. So what I do is I recommend is I got a nice woolen jacket on, a scarf and a beanie on in my house, because you can't sit around without all these clothes in your own house in Australia, because everyone's got this illusion that Australia's a hot climate. It's not. In many parts of Australia are quite cold in winter, cold enough to have a frost in the morning on the vegetables and what have you. And that means it's minus. And anything minus is quite cold for anyone. So when they say climate crisis, it's one they're creating for the people in the countries that have decided to lead the world in what is sort of a suicide of the economy for something that is basically a fantasy dreamt up by the likes of Al Gore, that anyone with any common sense who can read in about the history, understand and analyse statistics and data for themselves, know that the Western Hemisphere alone makes up so little of the actual CO2 into the atmosphere compared with the rest of the planet. Well, it's been made a scapegoat for something that it's responsible for, which is creating wealth through industrial development in years gone by. It's as if no one in the world wants industrial development. Everyone in the world is regretting getting out of the Stone Age, apparently. Well, apparently that's what it is. But the thing is about the climate crisis, and what makes it all sort of a lie, is that Pakistan have just announced that it's going to develop billions of tons of coal. Obviously, it wants to keep its people warmer. And it's realised that the best way to reduce its population growth is create wealth into its people, which usually does the trick. Usually people have lots of kids, like they did in Ireland, in England. They have 10, 15 kids each. And then they got wealthier and wealthier, and will give women more independence, and there's fewer and fewer children. And that's what happens. And the fewer people, once it levels off to a certain status in the world population, then the whole thing becomes a level within itself. It'll become an equilibrium within the globe, and people will have adjusted and learned how to live with the environment through education. The idea that anyone can change the climate, though, that humans are involved in changing climate, and even if they are involved in changing climate, what right has any human got to do to tell to other humans how to live according to their belief that we should be involved in all trying to stop a climate change? It is a belief system. It's philosophy. It depends on your philosophy. So if you're a Muslim, it's all down to God, and there's a billion Muslims on the planet who think it's all down to God. Of course, Muslims will be making money out of the financial side of the financing of wind generators and solar panels, which we don't need, and we wouldn't have needed at all if no one had mentioned climate change in the first place. We've just gone on with doing what we're doing and carried on and dealt with the problems as they rise, as they always do. See, humans invariably solve problems as they arise. They do not, and they know there are certain problems, like you need to have enough water, adequate water, to supply your people with sewage and showers and grow enough food, and that's the first priority of any company, any government. So if the countries aren't doing that, making sure they're prioritising the hydrological development of their country, then they're not acting on climate at all. They're acting against any suggestion that there's a problem with climate change. Because what is the problem? No one can say that the Earth is getting warmer. That's not a problem. That could be a benefit. If there's more CO2 and it's warmer, then more plants will grow, and more plants will sort of take advantage of the CO2, and there's more abundance of life. And as if climate change people, fanatics, are against abundance. And they must be against abundance because in places like Australia, one of the richest and wealthiest place on earth, was been expanding its economy, so it keeps saying, for the last few decades, 30 years of expanded economic growth, and yet more and more people now are suffering from hypothermia and suffering in their houses than there ever has been in Australia, although a few are getting rich out of all this nonsense. Some people are getting, and there's people there on ABC saying, oh, we've all got to make sacrifices. So they're sacrificing what? Her parents? Is she sacrificing her parents? Having them freeze to death? Or you can sacrifice your grandparents. So that's the sort of sacrifices that Australians are willing to make, is sacrificing their grandparents for what? When Pakistan is developing all that coal, and Australians are carrying on, and Americans and that, and in England as well, like they've all gone balmy, are carrying on like they alone dictate to the world how to be. I'm going to tell everyone, like Jane Goodall said, how if we could only get the Africans not to want what we've got. And it shows you living with chimps and whatever she's living with for long enough turns you into thinking like one. Because humans are all about developing themselves to become wealthier as possible, and each individual human has got every right as any other individual human to become as wealthy as any other individual human. And if you take that right away, you take all human progress away, and you're saying that progress is only allowed to be dictated to by an elite group. And what that progress is, what their idea of progress is, or what their left's idea of progress is actually regression and towards everyone else. Because if older people who've worked all their lives and paid taxes and sacrificed years and years of their life for the corporations and the government, paying all these taxes and everyone, all these other hangers on, are then denied adequate heating in winter, there's something catastrophically wrong with this idea that this is progress when it's not. It's obviously not progress when more and poor people are being caused to suffer in this progressive program which political correctness is all about. It's actually a very serious issue that I can take with a tongue in cheek, because these people are not serious about climate change and what to do about it, because if what you're doing about it is causing people to suffer and sacrificing, like in a euthanasia towards your old people, then that's what it is. It's Nazism reborn in a new era of it, but it's more sort of gentle. It doesn't come and put you in a concentration camp. It freezes people. Instead of cooking people to death in concentration camps, it's freezing hundreds of people to death in their homes right now as we speak. And that's caused, according to the left, that's called progress. Well, it might be progress to them, but one day they're going to be old. Then we'll see how they think about it then. But maybe they think the world's going to be 2 degrees warmer, so they won't have to be freezed to death in winter. All the world will be going to be the same. No ice anyway. It's all going to be the same. Good heavens. One has to conclude that political correctness has caused a psychological hysteria amongst a certain age group, used by the education system for an ideological purpose to create a regressive gene, a regressive evolutionary trait amongst the people. The first off the pot is the old people who are freezing to death and euthanizing them by making them sick. But the young people will be like a weaker genome, will not have the will to be individualized and individualistic, have the individual sovereignty. And by that, they weaken themselves. And that's how, in a way, the culling has begun. David Icke was right. No wonder they didn't want him to speak in Australia. We understand why now. But you can have Val Gore can speak. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?